We all know Rowley Jefferson. He's Greg's best friend and always has a positive outlook on everything. With his second spooky stories book coming out on August 11th, I thought it would be fun to take a closer look at his first one. But before we do that, we have to quickly go over Rowley's character. Since he sees sunshine and rainbows and everything, he gets taken advantage of by Greg pretty often. Usually he doesn't recognize that he's being manipulated, which is pretty apparent in Diary of an Awesome Friendly Kid. Just as a quick example, Greg made Rowley a Good Boy award when he made Rowley clean the garage with him. The original deal was that he'd give Rowley half of his Halloween candy, which he technically stuck with, but he left out some crucial details. Oh, and Rowley had to remind him about it because Greg was hoping he'd be able to weasel himself out of it. Mind you, this was only 3 jawbreakers and a box of raisins. Rowley rightfully got pretty mad about it and threatened to tell Susan, which got Greg sweating. He already ate all of his Halloween candy halfway through November, so he knew he'd be in hot water. He made Rowley a Good Boy award as consolation, and it worked. Greg of course saw an opportunity to take advantage of the concept. He started making even more Good Boy awards to make Rowley do stuff he didn't feel like doing, and over time he didn't put as much effort into the drawings either. Poor Rowley. By the way, this event lines up perfectly in Diary of a Wimpy Kid Project rules. During mid-November, after Greg's mom bug stash got exposed by Project's stupidity, Susan punished him by making him clean the whole garage. Greg of course lumped Rowley into it and didn't actually tell him until he got to his house. Greg also conveniently left out the Good Boy award part in his journal to make himself look good. I just want to mention that he'd be in even more trouble if Susan found out about his Halloween candy, so Greg has a knack for screwing himself over. Since Rowley doesn't usually know when he's being wronged, he's indirectly showing us what terrible things happen to him. It's quite sad that he's a shining light of happiness and Greg just takes it for granted. Now let's take a look at his spooky stories. If you read the book, chances are you notice that there's a lot of characters that reflect Rowley himself and others close to him. So in a way, they're a reiteration of Rowley's own life experiences. Without further ado, let's get into them. The Changing. This story is about a kid named Rowan. He got bullied for playing with toys, which made him stop bringing them to school. One day, he started growing hair like crazy, and his parents told him he was a werewolf. They were werewolves too, but they hid it from everyone else because there are ignorant people in the world who don't like anyone who is different. But Rowan didn't want to hide who he was, so he went to school the next day without shaving off his hair. Nobody messed with him, and he even inspired his parents to be their true selves too. The end. This story is pretty self-explanatory. It reflects how Rowley feels about his middle school classmates and others around him. He still likes playing with toys, but he got bullied by his classmates and most likely Greg for it. He also doesn't like how his classmates are trying too hard to seem more grown up than they actually are, Greg included. He doesn't want to be like that and just does what makes him happy. I think we could learn a thing or two from Rowley. The Prankster. There was a prankster who was notorious for pulling pranks on everyone in the village. Most of the time they were harmless and the villagers thought they were funny until it happened to them. But one day everyone was acting like he didn't exist, even after he made a fool of himself. He also didn't have a reflection, and his hand went through a donut platter. Later that day, he noticed a bunch of people wearing black and they were headed to a church. It was a funeral, and it was apparently for the prankster himself, Jasper. When it was time for everyone to say a few words about him, all they talked about were the pranks he pulled on them. But it turned out this was a prank on Jasper, and the whole village was in on it. Jasper finally knew what it was like getting pranked, and didn't want to admit that they got him good. They took it a step too far with their second half of the prank, though. The end. This one's also pretty self-explanatory. Don't do things you wouldn't want done to you. Chances are people will remember you for it. Rowley most likely got inspiration for this by the pranks he and Greg pulled. When the dollar bill prank and dog days went wrong and Mr. Jefferson got mad at the two boys, Rowley was pretty upset. Ghost friend. Oh boy, this This one is a doozy, so buckle up. There were two boys named Rusty and Gabe, but they're basically just Greg and Rowley. One day something terrible happened to Gabe, but Rowley doesn't want to say because it's too sad for a kid's book. I'll tell you what happened though. He died. Rusty was pretty sad because he missed Gabe and would do anything to spend one more afternoon with him. But his wish actually came true, and Gabe came back as a ghost. Since he was a ghost, he didn't have to go home and could hang out with Rusty all night if he wanted. Rusty didn't really want to stay up all night because it was a school night, but he bit his tongue and stayed quiet. Rusty wanted to tell his parents that Gabe was back, but Gabe insisted that they kept it a secret. When they decided to play video games, Gabe couldn't hold the controller since he was a ghost. Rusty had to play the games for him, but it was pretty miserable. After that, Rusty tried doing his homework. Unfortunately, it was impossible to do that with Gabe blabbering all night about ghosts, stuff, and other random things. Eventually, Rusty gave up on his homework and said he needed to go to sleep. Gabe said that was inconvenient for him since he didn't need to sleep, but Rusty tried going to bed anyway. Well, Gabe kept hanging around and talking about his crush named Kelsey Reed. This went on all night until next morning at Rusty's science class at school. Gabe still kept being disrupted though. After that was Spanish class, and there was a pop quiz. Ooh! Rusty didn't have a chance to study last night, but Gabe tried helping him cheat. However, Gabe gave him all the wrong answers since he wasn't the best at Spanish. During recess, Kelsey Reed sat on the bench next to Rusty. She was really nice to him, but Gabe was being super distracting and more or less ruined Rusty's chances with her. At this point, Rusty was pretty burnt out from Gabe and didn't even bother engaging with him on the way home. When they arrived home, Rusty tried studying for a test, but Gabe made it impossible. This was Rusty's breaking point, and he snapped at Gabe for being so annoying. He immediately regretted it though because he could tell he hurt Gabe's feelings. Gabe then started manipulating Rusty with his words, so Rusty apologized. So from then on, Gabe stuck around with Rusty. Rusty's grades went downhill, and he didn't bother going to college. He didn't try getting a girlfriend either because he knew Gabe would get in the way. Even though Rusty thought it was nice to have his best friend around, sometimes he wondered if he made a terrible mistake with how he turned out. The end. This story just about reflects how Rowley feels about his friendship with Greg. Greg tries his best to bring Rowley down when things go well for him because he doesn't want Rowley to harass him. Like when Rowley wants to be responsible and go to bed on a school night, Greg makes him stay up and waste time. When Rowley got a chance to be with Holly Hills, Greg shut that down immediately. And when Rowley finally snapped back, Greg acted super manipulative about it to make him feel sorry for it. I'm sorry, I know this is a goofy Diary of a Wimpy Kid video, but this is a textbook definition of a relationship. Greg's always trying to have control of Rowley, and Rowley's worried about his future if he sticks with Greg. Even when he tries to get away from Greg, he finds himself coming back to him eventually. I hope Rowley can find better friends like Colin. Well, on to the next story. But before that, I want to interrupt the video real quick. If you're enjoying it so far, I'd like to ask that you like and subscribe. But only if you're enjoying it, of course. I'm a pretty small channel, so any bit of support helps me out a lot. If you're on mobile, please hype the video too. This feature helps smaller creators get more attention. You can do it up to 3 times on one video, by the way. If you aren't using your hypes on anything else, why not use them here? I'd really appreciate it. Well, shameless plug over, let's get back to the spooky stories. The Biter. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Lily who liked biting everything, and I mean everything. Her parents took her to the pediatrician to see what was wrong, and they said that she was a vampire. So the doctor wrote a note to Lily's school explaining the situation. The school was pretty accommodating and made changes to make Lily feel more welcome. Lily got more popular at school, but that's when the doctor called her parents again. The tests were read wrong, and it turns out she was just a bad kid who liked biting a lot. Well, Lily's parents saw that she was doing well at school, so they decided to keep the truth to themselves, and that was that. The end. I couldn't make any official connections with this story, but Lily could be one of Rowley's extended family members. We don't actually know anything about Rowley's extended family, so this is probably a small glimpse into it. Or maybe it's just a girl he remembered from kindergarten who liked fighting a lot. I can't really say for sure. It's up for speculation. The human head. This story is about a human head named Anders and a headless body named Gunther. When they first met, they became fast friends. They spent almost every day together and made a lot of happy memories. When February rolled around, everyone at school was crazy about the Valentine's Day dance. Gunther and Anders were too shy to ask anyone out, so it was looking like they were going to spend Valentine's Day playing video games. That's when a girl named Prudence moved into town and showed up at school, and some boys were wishing they could ask her out to the dance instead. Gunther and Anders both thought she was cute and decided to team up to ask Prudence out. She said yes, and they had a date at the dance. Everything went well until Gunther and Anders bumped into a table and Anders fell into a bowl of punch. Prudence was mad that they deceived her, but when Gunther asked her for a dance, she accepted. On the other hand, Anders spent the rest of the night by himself while Gunther and Prudence had fun. After that night, the two friends started fighting for Prudence's attention. Prudence liked both of them though, so she spent time with both of them on different days. Anders liked spending time with Prudence, but he also liked hanging out with his best friend Gunther even more. So one day he told Gunther if he loved Prudence, then he wouldn't get in his way. Gunther proposed to Prudence that night, but she said her heart belonged to another. And as you've probably guessed, or read the book, it was Anders. Gunther never got over this and later became the headless horseman who terrorized young couples on Valentine's Day. On the flip side, Anders and Prudence started a family and lived happily ever after. The end. This story is Rowley's fantasy version of the events from the third wheel. Rowley changes a lot of details, but it's pretty similar to what happened to him, Greg, and Abigail. I find it a little interesting that he chose the headless horseman to be Greg. When Gunther turned evil, that coincides with when Greg and Rowley's friendship went downhill after Rowley dated Abigail. Did Rowley see Greg as evil when he dated Abigail? Maybe, but that could just be an exaggeration for this story. Oh yeah, I want to bring attention to this part real quick. Anders helped Gunther with his homework, and Gunther helped Anders with just about everything else. I wonder if this implies that Rowley thinks Greg helps him with everything while he only helps Greg with his homework. Obviously this isn't true at all with what we've seen, but maybe in Rowley's perspective Greg's the one doing everything for him. Just some food for thought. The scanner. Alright, so if you've seen the SpongeBob episode Squidville, his story is somewhat similar. I won't get into it, but if you want to learn about that, then I'd recommend watching this video by Karsten Renquist. I'll put a link in the description. At an international airport, there's a new high-tech security scanner that could scan people way faster. This wasn't properly tested though, and the people that went into it turned into skeletons. They weren't dead though, they were somehow still alive. At first they were annoyed, but they became celebrities overnight. There were benefits to being a skeleton, and now everyone wanted to be one. But then, some problems started to arise. Since everyone looked the same, certain things became worse or obsolete. People also lost their identity. Eventually, everyone wanted to be their old selves again, so they went to the airport to get changed back. The scientists had no idea how to reverse it though, so now everyone was mad. They dragged the scanner outside and threw it off the cliff where it blew up. That changed everyone back, but they probably should have brought an extra pair of pants. The end. I think this story is just a lesson that Rowley wanted to teach. If everyone was the same, that'd be a pretty terrible thing. Like I said, this story is very similar to Squidville, and it does a great job at showing why this is the case. The Cellar. There was once a boy named Rafe. He lived with his parents in a hut made of mud and straw. Rafe always obeyed his parents and never complained. But he never had any friends because his parents said it was too dangerous to travel outside. He made his own friends out of straw, which was fine, but he still wanted real friends. One night, Rafe heard strange, beeping noises coming from the cellar that he'd never heard before. He told his parents about it, but they said he was being nonsensical. He also wondered why his dad was in the cellar from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every Monday to Friday, but he kept quiet. Years went by, and now Rafe was 18. That's when his parents finally told him the truth about the outside world. It was full of technology, and they wanted to shield Rafe from them because they were very addictive. It turns out they weren't living in the past or anything like that. Rafe's parents just made it seem that way. They saw that Rafe was feeling overwhelmed by this information and felt bad about it. So they decided to give Rafe his very own phone since he was a man now and was ready for the real world. Unfortunately, Rafe got addicted to his phone pretty quickly and didn't want to leave home, making his parents have second thoughts about the whole thing. The end. Rowley has always been guarded by the outside world and screens by his parents, and his story reflects that. I think he fears that he'll get addicted if he gets too much access to technology, and maybe he's worried about that. Because don't you lie to me, you spend at least 5 hours on your phone every day. I know you do. And if you don't have a phone, it's probably a computer or video games instead. We're all guilty. The nap. There was an old lady named Frances, but her family called her Fanny. She had a lot of extended family members, but they never visited her. She spent her days in her condo watching soap operas on her big TV. One day, she came across an advertisement that's basically Life Alert and decided to get it. It was actually a pretty big moment for her, because normally she only uses her money as birthday money for her nieces and nephews. But they all take it for granted except Amber, who actually writes her thank you letters. When Fanny's not watching her soap operas, she's having a nap instead. But one of these naps came at a pretty bad time, because it was the day of the big game and her extended family wanted to see it. The tickets were sold out, so they had to watch it on TV. None of them owned a big enough TV for the event, but they knew Fanny did, so they headed to her condo without even calling first. They let themselves in and found Fanny sleeping, but they thought she was dead. Without checking for her pulse or anything like that to confirm she was alive, they went ahead and called a funeral home to have her buried on the spot. They all had a super quick service so they could watch the big game, which is pretty cruel if you ask me. Luckily for Fanny, she had her life alert button to get her out of there. The whole thing made Fanny kind of irritated at her family, and I don't blame her. They interrupted her nap, buried her alive, and then used her condo just for her TV. Not to mention they left a pretty big mess afterwards. After that, she passive-aggressively got back at them by putting less money in their birthday cards. She also took some preventive measures for her naps. Luckily, Amber made things right by giving Fanny the love she deserves by inviting her to every family get-together. Things ended on a pretty happy note, except for the fact she passed away during one of her naps. No one even noticed for a few days because she had to cut ping pong balls on her eyes. Yikes. Oh yeah, the end. This is most likely another look into Rowley's extended family. We don't actually see any characters that resemble Rowley or his parents, but I have a feeling this is a story of his great aunt. Pretty sad, but that's just how life is sometimes. The Stain. Robbie was a kid who went to the mall with his parents one Saturday. His parents gave him $5 to buy some ice cream, one for him and one for his dad. He clutched the money hard so he wouldn't drop it or spend it on something else. When he made it to the ice cream shop, he got himself his two favorite flavors, Rocky Road for him and strawberry for his dad. He got tempted to use his spare change on a ride, so he closed his eyes as he walked past it. But disaster struck, and he tripped, dropping his Rocky Road ice cream. He tried saving it, but it was no use. That's when he had the idea to tell his parents the strawberry ice cream was his, and the Rocky Road one for his dad, instead of being the other way around. His parents believed him and told him it was okay, but Robbie's guilt started to eat at him. He noticed an ice cream stain on his shirt when they got home and tried getting it off. But everything he tried just made it worse and worse. He eventually went to bed and had strawberry-themed nightmares. The next day, he finally told the truth to his parents. They told him it was fine and everybody makes mistakes. They even gave him a reward by taking him back to the mall for some more ice cream. Robbie got all rocky road this time, but he forgot his dad was allergic to almonds. At home, he noticed a small brown stain on his shirt. The end. His story is probably about Rowley lying for the first time. He's so pure-hearted that lying about something as small as this stuck with him for a long time. Or maybe it's the part where his dad had to be sent to the ER because of him. But even then, I don't think that was really his fault since he just forgot. A mummy. Mac was a mummy that got excavated and had his sarcophagus displayed in a museum, right next to the bathroom. Mac was pretty mad, so he wreaked havoc on the museum, the city, and the rest of the world. His reign of terror eventually died down, and people started losing interest, so he made himself at home in a small apartment. One day, Meg was watching the news and learned about Kappa's excavation, a pharaoh from a few thousand years ago. Meg was mad because this reminded him of his own excavation and how much he hated it. He calmed down, but then he learned that Kappa was better preserved and his tomb was full of riches. But the main difference between Meg and Kappa was that Kappa was curious about the world he was brought into instead of destroying everything. He got along really well with everyone and got super popular. That's when people started making mummy merchant Kappa's image without permission. Kappa decided to hire a lawyer to take them down and trademarked the mummy. Ned got mad again because he was around before Kappa, and now Kappa was getting all sorts of brands with his face on it. Beck decided to make some ads calling himself the original mummy and try getting some sponsors. He got a cease and desist letter from Kappa's lawyer a few weeks later, to the surprise of no one. Beck got mad again, so he hired his own lawyer and brought Kappa to court. Kappa ended up winning, so Mek was only allowed to call himself a mummy in all lowercase letters. Mek tried to make do with this, but it was pretty rough. He tried using a loophole by calling himself the dead pharaoh, but that backfired. As for Kappa, things were going great, but he got less popular over time. But his reputation got ruined when someone sued his cereal brand for having a toe in it. It turned out to be a sham, but that was enough for the mummy name to go down the drain. Kappa couldn't afford his fancy lifestyle anymore, and he eventually hit rock bottom. That's when he met Mek again face to face at a grocery store. After they talked for a bit, they realized they actually had a lot in common. They became friends and Kappa moved into Mek's apartment. They didn't always get along, but they were still good friends. The end. I had to think a little bit on what this story's deeper meaning actually was, and I think I got it. But first, what's important is that Mek represents Rowley and Kappa represents Greg. Rowley draws himself with a watermelon-shaped head, and Greg with a more egg-shaped one. It seems like an odd choice because Mek's the one who caused all sorts of damage and Kappa's the more calm and collected one. If you look at Greg and Rowley themselves, their personalities are reversed. I don't think that's too integral to the bigger idea though. So Kappa, aka Greg, got really popular for being a mummy, but Mek, or Rowley, got mad about it since he was the first. When Kappa trademarked the name The Mummy, that really sent Mek over the edge, so he tried to write off of it. Kappa sued Mek, but yada yada yada, they eventually become friends even with their disagreements. In Diary of an Awesome Friendly Kid, Rowley mentions how Greg doesn't like it when he copies the stuff he does. It's pretty apparent in the Wimpy Kid books too. When Rowley showed Greg his diary, Greg got mad and said he was gonna sue him for stealing his idea. Rowley responds by saying he should go ahead and try because he wasn't first to write in a diary, or journal. But then Greg tries to make a compromise by having Rowley agree to turn his journal into a biography about Greg. But maybe Rowley thinks that if Greg does get famous, he'll lose everything and end up back to where he started, as shown by the mummy story. This parallel makes the most sense to me, but I have to wonder if Rowley had a diary before Greg did. In the mummy story, Mek was the original mummy and Kappa was one who actually got popular for it. But the problem with this is that it doesn't line up with logic rules. In that book, Rowley's the one who got his sweet secrets diary for his birthday, so he's the one copying Greg. But we also have to keep in mind that Greg's a bit of an unreliable narrator. Am I looking too much into this? Yes I am. I guess only Jeff Kinney knows the truth. The Science Project. Victor Frankenstein was a boy who had a pretty boring life. He didn't have TV or video games to entertain himself, and all he had was science books to read. He was also sad that his parents wouldn't let him have a pet. On the bright side, Victor was a smart kid and his science teacher saw a great future in him. He was excited for the science fair and worked on his project for a whole month. Unfortunately, he lost first place to a girl who made a volcano that her parents probably helped with.
When I was young, I entered a science fair with my very first Innator. I wasn't very clever with names yet. It was just, Innator. Just as I was about to demonstrate my invention to the judges, a kid with a baking soda volcano stole the show!
All Victor could think about after that was his next year's science project and what he could do to win. He had a sick idea when he saw a cemetery out his back window, but he knew he'd win if his idea worked. When the next science fair rolled around, he finally put his experiments to the test. He won first prize and his creation came to life. All was well and good, but now he didn't know what to do with his creation. He tried ditching his project, but it stuck around. So he threw his stick into his cemetery, but it brought it back. That's when Victor realized he could have fun with his project and treat it like his own pet. He finally got his parents' approval, and the two of them spent every day together. Victor became famous for his science, and his creation was always by his side. But his sidekick didn't age, and Victor eventually died, leaving it behind. Victor's creation earned the nickname Frankenstein or Frankie because of his connection to his creator, but it just made him miss Victor. Frankie decided to start an education of his own, and he was a pretty quick learner. He skipped a few grades and won the middle school science fair. As for his project, well, like father, like son. The end. His story also had me a little stumped, but I think this best symbolizes Greg and Rowley's broken friendship in Dog Days and The Ugly Truth. It could also symbolize the very start of their friendship too. Obviously Victor is Greg, and Victor intended to ditch his project after he won first place in a science fair. He also got famous for his science one day. This reminds me of how Greg uses Rowley for his own personal gain, and how he sees their friendship as a short-term benefit. Rowley's always loyal to him though, and their friendship never really died out after they first met. Well, at least until the events of Dog Days where Rowley ruins Greg's chance at getting into a national video game tournament. The two of them are ex-friends in The Ugly Truth until Greg breaks the ice and asks to hang out again. Honestly, it seems a little far-fetched, but it's the best I got. If any of you have any better theories, I'd love to know. The Medicine Cabinet. This is a story about a curious boy named Ryan. He liked messing around in his parents' bathroom a lot. His parents didn't mind, but they warned him to never look in their medicine cabinet. Unfortunately, Ryan's curiosity got to the best of him, and he took a peek when his parents were asleep. There wasn't anything that interesting in there, but he put some of the makeup on his cheeks just for fun. Then he snuck back to bed. The next morning, he noticed that he looked younger in the mirror. It turns out the makeup he used was magical age-reversing makeup, so now he was in trouble. He tried to hide it when eating breakfast and rushed out the door to school. At school, he progressively looked younger and younger, so he kept his hoodie on. But one of his teachers had a rule with hats in the classroom, so he had to take it off. He got exposed. His teacher apparently had experience with this, so she gave him instructions on how to get the makeup off. Grace stopped getting younger, but he didn't get any older either. Ryan had to face the music with his parents, but he was greeted by two old people in the kitchen instead. It turns out they were his parents. Since they had Ryan when they were older, they used that age-reversing makeup to fit in with the rest of the parents. Ryan told him he didn't mind how old they were because he loved them no matter what. They didn't have any more of that makeup, but that was okay. They continued to be a happy family, even if they got some weird looks from strangers. The end. This story is most likely just Rowley disobeying his parents one time and turning it into a lesson. It's pretty similar to the lesson in The Changing, which is to not be afraid of what others think of you. That's pretty nice. Thanks, Rowley. The Invasion. There was a city called Fairview, and the people who lived there were the happiest people on Earth. But one day news broke out that there was a zombie invasion on the other side of the world. The people of Fairview didn't really pay it much mind since it was so far away. But they couldn't ignore it forever because eventually the invasion was moving towards their city. So the mayor held a meeting. They came up with a few ideas, but none of them stuck. Finally, the mayor pitched in. He said that since the zombie invasion was inevitable, they should just let him in. The zombies are crazy for brains, so maybe they could offer brain-shaped tofu for the zombies and welcome them with open arms. This actually ended up working, and the people and zombies became friends. Zombies now lived peacefully with the citizens, and they even elected a zombie as their new mayor. One day a giant spaceship appeared above the city. There was another meeting, and the same ideas were pitched as last time. When they went with the mayor's idea, unfortunately it didn't go as planned, and the aliens took over. Dang. The end. The best connection I can make with this story is the relationship between Plainview and Slacksville. I know Slacksville gets introduced after this book, but it's still the best comparison for this. The residents of Plainview despise Slacksville because they have all kinds of fancy places that were supposed to be Plainviews. Plainview was supposed to get a jewelry factory around 100 years ago, but some rich people from Slacksville stole it from them. Not only that, but Slacksville's peace offering was a bunch of bogus. Rowley's alien invasion story is probably his retelling of this. Even he doesn't like Slacksville, which really says something. Rowley tries to see the good in everything and everyone, but he isn't fooled by Slacksville. When Rowley doesn't like a town, that's how you know they're a bunch of scumbags. The Demon. For this last story, Rowley tells it to us straight instead of it being mixed in with some fantasy settings. Although I wouldn't say some of them took place in fairy tale land. Anyway, this is when Greg and Rowley had another sleepover. It's somewhat similar to the one they had in Dog Days. Mr. Jefferson said they needed to be in bed by 10, and Mrs. Jefferson came down to the basement with arts and crafts supplies at 7. Obviously, Greg didn't want to do that, and instead wanted to watch a movie that he found in Roderick's room. So they popped the movie in and watched it. It was about some teenagers who summoned a demon from a book, and the demon took control of one of their bodies. Rowley didn't want to see any more of it, and made Greg shut it off before it ended. They got into a debate about how fake it was, and Greg said the teenagers wouldn't have known how to read the ancient book. He went and proved that by saying the cursed spell from the movie, but then he started acting like the demon. Yeah, no. This is just Greg finding an excuse to get away with doing whatever crazy stuff he wants. I'm willing to bet he just wanted to raid the snacks and follow through with his glitter glue-infused intrusive thoughts. After a while of Greg causing chaos, he got sent home by Mr. and Mrs. Jefferson. They 100% had to clean up after him too, I bet. If you needed more evidence of Greg being super manipulative, well, there it is. Yeah, most of these spooky stories aren't all that spooky, are they? But I guess that's not the point of them. Reading through Rowley's books and seeing the impact Greg has had on them is a little sad, to be honest. It's also quite fascinating because it adds an extra perspective to things that Greg leaves out of his journals. Rowley's been pretty absent in the more recent Wimpy Kid books, so I'm pretty curious what Awesome Friendly Spooky Stories 2 has to offer. Like I said at the start of the video, it releases on August 11th, so we'll just have to wait and see. I'm looking forward to reading it because Jeff Kinney never disappoints with his books. Even my least favorite Wimpy Kid books got some laughs out of me. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. I guess I should talk about this real quick. So if you watched my last video, you probably noticed that I didn't mention some characters in this book that should have been included. The truth is, I didn't forget about them, but I decided to stick with the mainline book appearances and not the spin-offs. There are a few characters I forgot to mention, but I'm not planning on making a part 2 anytime soon. But if that's what you guys want to see, just let me know. By the way, I'm really thankful for all the love that video got. I wasn't expecting it to get as big as it did because it was just a dumb idea I had. But anyway, I had fun making and of course editing this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. I cover all things Wimpy Kid related, so if that's something you'd like to see, please like, subscribe, and hype the video. Well, that's all for now, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.